the last part of this build, I got this mini bike rolling and practically driving with the help of gravity. The next step is to take this empty frame and give it power and all the necessary things to drive. Welcome back to the shop. This is Brant Build Stuff, and this is part 3 of my full suspension mini bike build. Before I can do anything, I need to take it all apart. Then I can add in some extra bracing that will help support the lower frame when the engine is installed. Then I got to work on making a spot for the seat. I used small diameter tubing to make a small frame that a seat could easily mount to. One advantage of this is that you can actually use it with or without the cushion of the seat. I'm trying to keep this build as low cost as possible, so I'm making my own foot pegs. I'm using some 1" by 3/16 flat bar and started by making lots of notches in the bar that make bending it accurately much easier. With the main structure of the foot peg done, I can start shaping it and making it actually look like what it's supposed to be. To make my life simpler, I decided not to make these able to flip up, so I just welded them onto a tube that I'll weld directly onto the bottom of the frame. I decided on this location for the pegs, which is much farther back than a regular mini bike, and looking back, I think I should have put them even further back. This is because the closer to underneath the seat you get these, the easier it is to stand up and maneuver it. Although keeping the foot pegs closer to the front is a more relaxed ride. Just think about a dirt bike versus a Harley. As of now, the mini bike frame is completely finished. The foot pegs are mounted, all the bracing that I think I'm going to be adding is on. It's going to be nice. With that, the frame is fully welded and finished. For the jack shaft, I'm using 3/4 inch round stock, but I have to put keyways into it. For this, I'm going to use a grinding disc on an angle grinder. I did this on a chainsaw powered scooter that I made, and it worked pretty well. If you do this right, you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and get some free weight reduction on your coat.
I burnt a hole in my jacket.
For this project, I'm using sprockets with weld-on hubs, because they're easy to get locally. I'm using a 30-tooth sprocket for the input to the jack shaft and a 13-tooth output. Then I can start putting everything back together, starting with the jack shaft assembly and swing arm, then moving on to the front suspension fork assembly. This engine is a 196cc Power Fist, which is basically the equivalent of a Predator engine. Then it's onto the back wheel and axle assembly. The final step to complete the drivetrain was to add chains. With 12 teeth coming off the torque converter, going to 30 teeth on the jack shaft, and then from 13 teeth to 37 teeth, my gear ratio is about 7. With the torque converter, the gear ratio is increased, but at max RPM, it'll stay at about 7. For the exhaust, I found a muffler on Amazon, then found a cap of some sort that has a similar thread that I could drill out. I'll weld this piece onto the header so that the muffler can thread right into it. After making some relief cuts, I get my header bent into the right shape. I welded all of the components together and I had my finished exhaust. All it needs is some heat wrap. Then I can move on to the intake. Off camera, I started working on my adapter for the air filter, and instead of getting like just a regular adapter, I got some 50mm washers, and then I drilled them out and profiled them so that they fit like the previous airbox did. These will just slide right onto the carburetor, just like that. And then I can take my 50mm air filter, and then that'll slide on and clamp onto the outside of those washers. These bolts are a little long, so this can't slide on right now, but I'll have to cut these down and then it should work. This way of making the intake is so much cheaper than buying an actual air filter adapter. You just have to make sure that you cut in all the ports and slots that are needed for the carb to get proper airflow. These nuts stick out just a little bit. I had to do some trimming to get the filter to fit on, but I made sure to put some paper towel in the carb so no metal dust got into it. I made a bracket that attaches to the gas tank that I could weld right onto the frame. I've never seen anyone put a stock gas tank on top of the frame like a standard motorbike, but I think it will work quite well. Doing these extra things like the exhaust, intake, and repositioning the gas tank allowed me to make the whole frame a lot shorter, which will give me more ground clearance, and I was able to make this happen with very little extra cost. I quickly installed the brake. I used a brake lever off an old bike, which isn't very good quality, but it works. Kinda. Then I could get the throttle assembly installed and working. After adding oil, I could finally see my creation come to life. Or not. If you can't tell, the engine would start but stay at super low RPMs and barely run. When I opened up the throttle, nothing would happen and it wouldn't move at all. I figured that because I have an aftermarket exhaust and intake, I was running the engine way too lean. But I couldn't adjust the carburetor because for some reason, the carbs on these engines are set at specific spots in the factory for optimal performance, and there's no adjustment screws. So I decided to order a new carburetor that has adjustment screws and try again. To install the new carburetor, all I had to do was remove the air filter, take out the paper towel in the stock carburetor,
Dang it. I left this paper towel in the car. Maybe it will work.
Put the air filter back on and put the new carburetor in a safe spot that I'll immediately forget about. That seemed to do the trick. After a few months of building something like this, it's pretty rewarding to be able to really test it out for the first time. Surprisingly, nothing actually broke, although the brakes could definitely use some work. And so, the full suspension mini bike is successfully running under its own power and is working great. Although it doesn't work great in the snow, yet. But on dry ground, I can rip around faster than you can get your finger on that like button. If you haven't seen the first couple parts of this build, go check them out, and stay tuned for part 4 where this bike will be taken to completion. Thanks for watching, see you next time.